My Lords, I would first like to declare an interest, I suppose, as High Steward of Cambridge University, and in that context I was particularly delighted by the remarks of Lord Taverne, and I would endorse the reality, the harsh reality, that the preeminence of our science and the preeminence of Cambridge University in particular in science would certainly be damaged by exit from the European Union. It is simply a fact. My Lords, with every day that passes in this European referendum, I am seized by the folly of this enterprise. It has been born of divisions within the Conservative Party, and its outcome, whatever that may be, will certainly not resolve them. Thus far, this referendum has in fact exacerbated them. It started as a tactic essentially to outmaneuver UKIP and Eurosceptic activists in Tory constituencies. And that was before the last general election. As such, it was rendered pointless by the outcome of that election, but the die was cast, the commitment was made, and the outcome can only deliver one of two verdicts on the Prime Minister. Either he will go down in history as the Prime Minister who took us out of Europe by accident and miscalculation, or as a kind of Houdini, who, as with the Scottish referendum, at the last moment escaped fate with a final flourish. Is folly the appropriate description of this enterprise? I believe so, because it's hard to describe this as anything else but folly, when Boris Johnson, the most conspicuous contender for the hollow crown, thinks that prize justifies questioning the motives of President Obama's interventions on the ground of his part Kenyan ancestry, or indeed persuades him to claim that the European Union is an attempt to impose Hitlerian unity on Europe by other means. These are surely the cadences of folly. If the genesis of this referendum, my Lords, lies within the long festering blue-on-blue clash within the Conservative Party, it has now enveloped all parties, all parts of the United Kingdom, all the nations of the European Union, and the transatlantic relationship itself. The principal consequence of this referendum is indeed division, indeed a welter of different divisions, which collectively and accumulatively jeopardise to a real extent the unity of the people and indeed of our society. These divisions pull us apart, as an authoritative analysis published by the Financial Times on the 2nd of June demonstrated all too painfully. There is the evident division between majority and minority attitudes in London, and between London and many other parts of England. Then there is the division between sentiment in Scotland and England, and possibly between opinion in England and Wales. Within the framework, my Lords, of devolution and the evolution of separate parliaments, there is in this the promise of further serious trouble ahead. Then there are the divergences between young and old, between better educated and those less fortunate, between those more prosperous and those less so. And above all, there is a psychological divide, as has been referred to in the debate, between optimism and pessimism. Now, both sides can and do claim self-belief. Both sides, I believe, share patriotism. But the prominence of immigration in this referendum shines a harsh and revealing light on this whole enterprise. The division here is more than a row about statistics. It is a thermometer taking the temperature of who we think we are. Now, of course, this is not unique to us. The Americans are torn by the issue of immigration. It lies at the heart of Europe's crisis. But is our reaction to reject international interdependence, to build walls, to draw up drawbridges? Because if it is, then we are indeed at risk. Now, there is, of course, nothing wrong in facing up to fundamental issues, even if so often these are deeply divisive and painful. It is the process of democracy. But I believe we should remain increasingly vigilant that referenda are not allowed to replace the power and responsibility of Parliament. And this again is where folly lurks in the wings. The public has been encouraged, indeed by both sides, to see this referendum as decisive, and historically it may prove to be so. But if decisiveness is assumed to deliver instant or even rapid change, then the public will have been misled and indeed deceived. What is quite clear from the excellent and worrying report of the European Union Committee on the process of withdrawing from the EU, which we have debated, are judgments which make a mockery of the expectations engendered by this referendum. First, paragraph 15, that there is nothing in Article 50 of the treaty to prevent a member state from reversing its decision to withdraw in the course of the withdrawal negotiations. Second, in the report, paragraphs 31 and 34, that if a majority on the 23rd is for Brexit, the United Kingdom will need to negotiate two treaties, one for withdrawal and, in parallel, one to establish our future relationship with the European Union, including terms of access to the single market. Given the fact that the single market is where half our exports go, and that it is vital in terms of attracting inward investment from countries like the States and India, South Korea and others, this second parallel negotiation is vital to whatever government negotiates on our part. And the parallel negotiation will be tortuous and tense. As one witness to the committee said, the United Kingdom will be presented with almost unimaginable long-term ghastliness in the legal complications involved. To cut to the point, these parallel negotiations, let alone with those involving EU legislation embedded in Scottish legislation, may well outlast the life of this Parliament and indeed of this government. Instant resolution is a myth. It is not going to happen. But to appear to offer it is indeed folly. One matter is clear, my lords. This perilous and hugely demanding series of negotiations, which Brexit must involve, requires a government which is united and commands a majority in Parliament. For this to be achieved may require, whatever the constitutional difficulties, a further general election. I've spent a large part of the last 2 years, as a matter of fact, writing a book about Winston Churchill in 1946. During that period, he made two very famous speeches. One was at Fulton, Missouri, where he revealed to the American public that Joe Stalin was not good old Uncle Joe at all, but a tyrant determined to extend his control over the rest of Europe, and he made the appeal to the Americans to come to Europe's defence, which they subsequently, thank God, did. And if we ever wondered why Mr. Obama has a right to offer our opinion, us his opinion, surely what the Americans did then and in the post-war period justifies it. But the second speech he made 6 months later, Churchill, in Zurich, the so-called Europe Arise speech. Now, in that speech, he said to his audience, I am going to startle you, and he did, because what he proposed was a kind of United States of Europe, which would be led by a partnership between France and Germany. He did not propose that we should join it. It wasn't there. What he said was that we should unequivocally support it. And he was absolutely right. And that second speech had as much impact as the first. The first, arguably, kicked the process which led eventually to NATO and the defence of Berlin. The second definitely kicked in the process which led to Marshall Aid and eventually to the European Coal and Steel Community. And so, if I look back on that now, I have been asked by many people, and it has been discussed on the media a great deal, what would Churchill's view have been? Well, of course, we do not know. But there is something which we should remember. Churchill, in his advocacy and support for Franco-German unity and a kind of United States of Europe, did so because he believed that Britain's place in the world turns decisively on being at the centre of three great circles of influence: the English-speaking world outside of the United States, the Commonwealth, the relationship with the United States, and Europe. And he also believed that if we allowed ourselves to be pushed out of any one of those three circles, or allowed ourselves to take ourselves out of any one of these three circles, we would be critically damaged and diminished in the remaining two. If we do that now with Brexit, I believe that will again be the case.
Very good.
My Lords, as I listened to the wonderful speeches of the noble Lords Jay, Cormac and Bilimoria, invidiously picking just three out of what could have been a much larger number, and I could certainly have included the last speech which we've just listened to from noble Lord Watson. As I listened to these speeches,